The HOA president looked directly at my service dog and said, "Either the animal goes or you do." The entire clubhouse went silent after she said it. Even people who normally supported the HOA looked uncomfortable hearing those words out loud. Karen kept going. She claimed my dog made other residents feel uneasy and said the neighborhood needed stricter pet restrictions to maintain community standards. What she did not realize was that my dog was legally protected, and what happened next would eventually bring federal investigators, lawyers, and the Justice Department straight into our little suburban HOA. And by the end of it, all the management company handling the association was drowning in lawsuits, fines, and public humiliation. Name is Ryan Mercer, and my service dog Atlas has been with me for almost 5 years. Atlas is a trained medical alert dog, calm, smart, loyal, and honestly better behaved than most people living in the neighborhood. He helps detect serious medical episodes before they happen, and because of him, I have avoided multiple dangerous situations over the years. Most neighbors loved him immediately. Kids waved at him during walks, and older residents often stopped to pet him while chatting outside. Everything stayed peaceful until Denise became HOA president. Denise was obsessed with rules. Not reasonable rules, either. Power rules, the kind of person who measured grass height with a ruler and once fined someone because their holiday wreath remained hanging. One day too long. At first, she mostly ignored Atlas because she probably assumed he was just another pet. Then, one afternoon, she saw him walking beside me near the community pool area, and suddenly, everything changed. The next morning, I received a violation. Notice saying animals were prohibited in shared recreational spaces, including sidewalks surrounding pool property. I honestly thought it was a misunderstanding, so I politely emailed the HOA, explaining Atlas was a trained service dog protected under federal law that should have ended the situation immediately. Instead, Denise doubled down. A week later, another notice arrived demanding I submit confidential medical documentation directly to the HOA board for review. That was illegal too, but Denise clearly believed she could intimidate me into compliance. Before this gets crazier, make sure to like and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because this HOA battle eventually exploded into federal complaints, legal investigations, and one of the biggest HOA collapses this neighborhood had ever seen. Now, I tried staying calm at first. I sent the HOA copies of the federal guidelines explaining service animal protections. I even included public ADA information showing they could not deny access or demand invasive medical details, but Denise ignored all of it. Instead, the HOA started issuing escalating fines every single week, claiming unauthorized animal violations, $200, then $400. Then suspension threats from community facilities. Situation became absurd. Fast neighbors started asking questions because Atlas was literally the calmest dog in the neighborhood, while other residents had barking untrained pets causing actual problems. But Denise became obsessed with removing him. Then came the clubhouse meeting that changed everything. I attended, hoping the board would finally act reasonably once the issue was discussed publicly. Instead, Denise stood in front of the room and announced the HOA would begin enforcing strict animal control policies without exceptions. Then she looked directly at me and said, the sentence I will never forget. Either the animal goes or you do. People instantly started whispering around the room. One older resident actually said, "You cannot say that about a service dog," but Denise ignored everyone. That was the exact moment I stopped trying to cooperate nicely. Because what Denise did not know was that my cousin worked for a disability rights advocacy group, and the second I explained everything, she told me to document every single interaction immediately. So that night I organized every violation notice, every email, every recorded meeting statement, and every fine the HOA had sent me. And honestly, once everything was laid out together, the situation looked horrifying. Illegal document demands, discrimination, language, retaliation, threats, selective enforcement, public humiliation during meetings. The HOA had practically built a federal case against themselves without realizing it. Days, formal complaints were filed with multiple agencies, including housing discrimination investigators. And suddenly, Denise's little HOA power game became very, very real. Because the first official federal inquiry letter arrived less than 3 weeks later, and when that envelope showed up at the HOA office, panic spread through the board almost instantly. The moment federal investigators became involved, the entire atmosphere inside the neighborhood changed. Suddenly, Denise stopped acting confident during meetings. The same woman who once threatened me in front of the clubhouse could barely answer basic questions once attorneys started requesting documents and communication records. And honestly, the deeper investigators looked, the worse things became for the HOA. Because my case was not the only problem they uncovered. While reviewing complaints, they discovered multiple residents had received questionable violations over disability accommodations, parking access, and emotional support requests over the past few years. Most people simply gave up fighting because they assumed the HOA always had more power. But now, federal agencies were paying attention, and that terrified the management company handling the association. Especially after investigators requested internal emails, that was the turning point, because several board members, including Denise, had written messages openly mocking accommodation requests and discussing ways to pressure homeowners into voluntarily leaving the neighborhood. One email actually described Atlas as a legal loophole with fur. The second that message surfaced, everything exploded. Residents became furious. Even homeowners who normally supported strict HOA rules suddenly realized the board had crossed serious legal and ethical lines. The management company immediately hired outside attorneys trying to contain the disaster, but by then it was already too late. Housing discrimination complaints started spreading beyond just my case. Other residents came forward sharing stories about intimidation, selective enforcement, and retaliation. Local news stations even started contacting homeowners asking questions after public records requests exposed the federal investigation. And once media attention hit the neighborhood, Denise completely lost control. One camera crew filmed outside the entrance while residents argued during an emergency HOA meeting that lasted nearly 4 hours. I attended quietly with Atlas sitting beside me the entire time, completely calm while board members panicked around the room. Honestly, the contrast made everything look even worse for them. At one point, Denise actually tried blaming me for bringing negative attention to the community. That comment backfired. Immediately, several residents openly defended me, saying none of this would have happened if the HOA simply followed federal law from the beginning. Even one former board member admitted Denise ignored legal warnings because she believed nobody would challenge the HOA successfully. That confidence disappeared very quickly once federal investigators started interviewing residents directly. Then came the financial disaster. Because defending discrimination claims, especially against federal involvement, became unbelievably expensive for the association. Legal fees exploded, insurance companies started distancing themselves, special assessments were discussed, and homeowners became furious, learning HOA funds were being drained because Denise refused to stop targeting a legally protected service animal. The management company eventually tried settling quietly, but by then too much damage had already happened. Publicly, federal penalties were issued, mandatory policy changes were ordered, and multiple lawsuits from residents followed afterward. Within less than a year, the association was drowning. Financially, people started selling homes just to escape the chaos. The management company lost major contracts in nearby communities after word spread about the investigation and Denise. Well, she resigned long before the final collapse happened, but honestly, resignation did not save her reputation. Around the neighborhood, people still remembered exactly how she treated residents, especially anyone needing accommodations. As for Atlas, he became something of a neighborhood symbol after everything ended. Residents who once stayed quiet started speaking up more openly whenever the HOA pushed unreasonable rules, and surprisingly, the community actually improved once fear stopped controlling every conversation. Neighbors relaxed. More, meetings became calmer. People finally started acting like humans instead of rule enforcement machines. The funniest part is that Atlas never changed through any of this, yet adults fought lawsuits, investigations, and HOA politics. He still spent every morning happily walking beside me like none of the chaos mattered. And honestly, maybe that is why this whole story hit people so hard. Because at the center of all this drama was not some dangerous problem. It was a calm, loyal service dog helping someone live safely. And somehow, the HOA chose to declare war against that. If you enjoyed this story from Karen Stories Daily, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video, and tell me honestly, have you ever seen somebody destroy their own reputation over a completely pointless power trip?